War. War never changes.
Some kind of war junkie?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Welcome to the War 102 podcast, where we explore the doctrine, theory, philosophy, and history of warfare. I'm your guide, Paul Darling, and I want to share what I learned in nearly 30 years in uniform. So let's get to learning about the most influential activity in human history, war. Welcome to episode 92, the Mexican-American War. I give it as my fixed opinion that, but for our graduated cadets, the war between the United States and Mexico might, and probably would have lasted, some 4 or 5 years, with, in its first half, more defeats than victories falling to our share, whereas in less than 2 campaigns, we conquered a great country and a peace, without the loss of a single battle or skirmish. General Winfield Scott. Not sure if they still do, but this quote was part of the West Point lore that first-year cadets, known as plebes, were forced to memorize. But for all of that, I learned nothing more about the Mexican-American War in any of my formal military training, up to and including the Army War College. So with all that, let's take a gander at the war with our southern neighbor that was so decisive that butthurt about it continues today. The Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848 stands as a defining chapter in the annals of North American history, a conflict that not only redrew the continent's map, but also exposed raw ambitions, ideological fervor, and strategic complexities of mid-19th century nation-building. Spanning just under 2 years, the war pitted the United States, a burgeoning republic driven by the doctrine of manifest destiny, against Mexico, a young nation still grappling with the aftershocks of its independence from Spain. The outcome was transformative. The United States acquired over 500,000 square miles of territory, extending its reach to the Pacific Ocean and setting the stage for its emergence as a continental powerhouse. For Mexico, the war represented a catastrophic loss, territorial, economic, and psychological, that deepened internal fractures and fueled an enduring narrative of foreign aggression and national resilience. At its heart, the war was fueled by territorial disputes, economic disparities, and clashing visions of sovereignty. The United States, with a population exceeding 20 million and a rapidly industrializing economy, sought to expand westward, viewing the vast, underpopulated Mexican territories as essential for growth, trade, and security. Mexico, with around 7 million inhabitants and an economy hampered by debt, civil strife, and colonial legacies, struggled to assert control over its northern frontiers. The conflict claimed an estimated 13,000 American lives, predominantly from disease, and about 25,000 Mexican casualties. Key figures like U.S. Presidents James K. Polk and Zachary Taylor, Mexican leader Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, shaped the war's trajectory through bold decisions and tactical gambling. The roots of the Mexican-American War trace back to the turbulent early decades of the 19th century. Mexico's independence in 1821 followed a grueling 11-year war against Spain, leaving the nation fragmented and economically depleted. Vast territory stretched from Central America to the northern reaches of California, New Mexico, and Texas. But these regions were sparsely settled, to say the least, with populations often numbering in the mere thousands. To bolster defenses against indigenous raids and potential foreign incursions, Mexican governments implemented policies to attract settlers. People like Stephen F. Austin were granted expansive landholdings in Texas, conditional on recruiting families who would convert to Catholicism, learn Spanish, and abide by Mexican laws. By the 1830s, Anglo-American immigrants outnumbered native Tejanos, introducing cultural tensions exacerbated by slavery, which Mexico had abolished in 1829, yet many settlers ignored the ban. These frictions erupted into the Texas Revolution of 1835. Santa Anna, who had risen to power as a centralist leader, dissolved the Federalist Constitution of 1824, sparking revolts across multiple provinces. In Texas, settlers formed provisional governments and armed militias. The siege of the Alamo in February through March of 1836 became a symbol of defiance. Approximately 200 Texian defenders, including frontiersmen Davy Crockett and James Bowie, held the converted mission against Santa Anna's 1,800 to 6,000 troops for 13 days. Mexican forces, employing siege artillery and infantry assaults, eventually breached the walls on March 6, killing nearly everyone in close-quarters combat. This tactical victory for Mexico came at a cost of 400 to 600 casualties, and this merely fueled Texian resolve. The revolution's climax occurred at San Jacinto on April 21, 1836. Sam Houston's 800-man army surprised the much larger forces of Santa Anna encamped during a siesta, launching a rapid infantry charge supported by a mere 2 artillery pieces. The battle lasted just 18 minutes. The Texicans overran Mexican positions, capturing Santa Anna and forcing him to sign treaties recognizing Texas independence. However, Mexico repudiated these under duress and never formally acknowledged the Republic of Texas, which endured as an independent entity for 9 years amid economic woes and border skirmishes. In the United States, Texas annexation became a flashpoint in national politics. Southern Democrats advocated for it to expand slavery-dependent cotton plantations, while Northern Whigs and abolitionists opposed it, fearing disruption of the Missouri Compromise's sectional balance. President John Tyler, in his waning months, secured annexation via joint resolution in February of 1845, avoiding a treaty supermajority requirement. James K. Polk, elected on an expansionist platform, formalized it in December of 1845, which only made the Mexicans angry. Polk embodied manifest destiny, kind of a blend of providential mission, racial superiority, and economic opportunism. He aimed not only to secure Texas, but also to acquire California for its harbors and New Mexico for trade routes. Diplomatic efforts faltered. Envoy John Slidell arrived in Mexico City in November of 1845, offering up to $30 million for the territories and debt relief. But successive Mexican regimes, plagued by coups and instability, refused negotiations. Mexico insisted the Nueces River marked Texas's border, while the U.S. claimed the Rio Grande, created a contested 150-mile strip. Internal Mexican politics compounded the crisis. Federalists and Centralists vied for power, with figures like José Joaquín de Herrera facing accusations of treason for even considering talks. A coup installed Mariano Paredes, a militarist who mobilized troops. Meanwhile, Polk resolved the Oregon dispute with Britain in June of 1846, freeing focus southward. Santa Anna, exiled in Cuba, intrigued with U.S. officials, promised peace if repatriated. But upon return, he rallied against the invaders. By early 1846, escalation was inevitable. Polk ordered Zachary Taylor, a seasoned frontier commander, to advance 4,000 troops from Corpus Christi into the disputed zone, constructing Fort Texas, later Fort Brown, opposite Matamoros. This move, involving earthworks and artillery placements, was seen as provocative. Mexican General Mariano Arista crossed the Rio Grande with 3,400 men, aiming to isolate Taylor's supply lines. The war truly ignited on April 25, 1846, with the Thornton Affair. Mexican cavalry ambushed Captain Seth Thornton's 70-man U.S. patrol in the disputed Thorn Scrub region, killing 11 and capturing 52 in a swift encirclement. Polk framed this as an invasion of American soil, securing Congress's war declaration on May 13th by votes of 174 to 14 in the House and 40 to 2 in the Senate. Opposition, including Abraham Lincoln's spot resolutions challenging the attack's location, highlighted domestic divisions. The war's opening engagements in northern Mexico showcased U.S. tactical superiority in artillery and disciplined infantry, contrasted with Mexican numerical advantage and cavalry prowess. The Battle of Palo Alto on May 8, 1846, marked the first major clash. Taylor, with 2,200 men, marched to relieve besieged Fort Texas, encountering Arista's 3,800 troops on a flat prairie dotted with scrub brush. Arista deployed his forces in a linear formation, infantry in the center, cavalry on the flanks, and artillery interspersed. He initiated with a cannonade from 9 guns, but Mexican smoothbore cannons, firing solid shot, proved inaccurate at range. Taylor countered with innovative flying artillery, light mobile 6-pounder guns under Major Samuel Ringgold and Captain James Duncan. U.S. gunners, employing canister and grape shot, advanced in bounds, firing while repositioning to avoid counter-battery fire. This mobility disrupted Mexican advances. Arista ordered his lancers to charge the U.S. right flank, but American infantry formed squares, repelling the cavalry with volley fire from rifled muskets, which outranged Mexican smoothbores. As dusk fell, a grass fire ignited by artillery obscured the field, halting the combat. Casualties were lopsided. Mexicans suffered 102 killed with 129 wounded. Americans lost 9 killed and 47 wounded. Tactically, U.S. artillery dominance, firing over 3,000 rounds, prevented Mexican envelopment, forcing Arista's retreat southward. The following day, on May 9th, saw the Battle of Resaca de la Palma. Arista withdrew to a dry riverbed lined with dense chaparral, positioning infantry along the banks with artillery commanding the road. His 4,000 men aimed to ambush Taylor's pursuing 1,700. Taylor advanced cautiously, deploying skirmishers to probe. Captain Charles A. May's dragoons charged the Mexican center, capturing General Romulo Diaz de la Vega and several guns in a daring saber assault, though May's horse was shot out from under him. U.S. infantry, including the 5th and 8th regiments, flanked through the thickets, engaging in close quarters bayonet fighting. Taylor's personal command, "Double shot your guns and give 'em hell," rallied troops amid chaotic melee combat. Arista's lines crumbled under the pressure. His cavalry failed to counter effectively. Mexicans fled, abandoning artillery and supplies. 154 Mexicans killed, 205 wounded, and 156 captured. For the U.S., 33 killed and 89 wounded. These victories secured the Rio Grande, demonstrating U.S. adaptability in open and broken terrain. Taylor pressed southward, besieging Monterrey in September of 1846. The city, fortified with citadels like the Black Fort and natural defenses from the Santa Catarina River, housed 7,300 Mexican troops under General Pedro de Ampudia. Taylor's 6,200 men divided. General William J. Forth flanked west to cut supply lines, while Taylor assaulted from the east. On September 20th, U.S. forces stormed fortified hills, Independence and Federation, using howitzers to suppress defenders. Street fighting ensued. Infantry cleared houses with axes and bayonets, supported by mortar fire. Ampudia, facing encirclement, negotiated surrender on September 24th. The U.S. lost 82 killed, while Mexican losses were 367 killed. An 8-week armistice followed, criticized by Polk for leniency. Santa Anna, now president, exploited the pause, assembling 20,000 men at San Luis Potosi. In February 1847, he marched 15,000 through arid terrain, enduring attrition to attack Taylor at Buena Vista. Taylor, with 4,800, mostly volunteers, positioned on a plateau near Hacienda Buena Vista, using ravines and artillery to anchor his flanks. Santa Anna demanded surrender, and Taylor refused. On February 23rd, Mexican infantry assaulted the U.S., nearly breaking through, but Colonel Jefferson Davis's Mississippi Rifles in a V formation repelled with enfilading fire. U.S. artillery, including Captain Braxton Bragg's battery, shredded advances with canister. A heavy rainstorm halted fighting. Santa Anna withdrew, claimed victory, but he lost 600 killed, another 1,000 wounded, and 2,000 missing, who were mostly deserters. U.S. casualties were not light, but far less than the Mexicans, with 267 killed and 456 wounded. Tactically, defensive positioning and volunteer resolve blunted Mexican numbers. In the West, Colonel Stephen W. Kearny's 1,700-man Army of the West departed Fort Leavenworth in June of 1846, marching 900 miles to Santa Fe. Facing minimal opposition, Mexican Governor Manuel Armijo fled. Kearny occupied the town on August 18th, establishing a civil government. Kearny then led 300 dragoons to California, linking with naval forces. In California, settlers proclaimed the Bear Flag Republic in June of 1846. Commodore John D. Sloat seized Monterey on July 7th. Robert Stockton and John Fremont consolidated control. At San Pasqual, Kearny's exhausted column clashed with California lancers under Andres Pico. U.S. dragoons charged but were lanced in the melee, suffering 17 killed, and the Mexicans a mere 1. Reinforcements secured Los Angeles by January of 1847. Guerrilla warfare persisted, with irregulars harassing supply lines, but U.S. naval blockades and patrols subdued resistance. Polk then shifted to a central invasion. General Winfield Scott, with 12,000 men, executed the war's largest amphibious operation at Veracruz on March 9, 1847, landing unopposed south of the city. Scott encircled the fortress with siege lines, trenches, and batteries. Veracruz, defended by 3,300 under Juan Morales, boasted thick walls with 200 guns. Scott's navy bombarded for 4 straight days in March, firing 6,700 projectiles and causing many civilian deaths. Morales surrendered on March 29th after U.S. infantry prepared for assault. Among the casualties were 13 killed from the U.S. with 55 wounded. The Mexican killed were about 80 with another 100 wounded. The tactical siege demonstrated combined arms effectiveness. He then advanced inland, Scott facing Santa Anna at Cerro Gordo on April 18th. Santa Anna's 12,000 entrenched on heights overlooking the National Road, with artillery dominating passes. Scott's engineers, Robert E. Lee and Joseph Hooker, scouted a flanking trail through rugged terrain. On April 17th, U.S. forces hauled artillery uphill via ropes, outflanking the Mexicans. Haney's brigade stormed Telegraph Hill under covering fire, capturing batteries in hand-to-hand combat. Panic spread, and the Mexicans were routed, losing 1,000 killed, with another 1,200 wounded and 3,000 captured. The U.S. losses were 63 killed with 368 wounded. This maneuver warfare bypassed all the strong points and opened the highlands. Scott occupied Puebla on May 15th, pausing only for reinforcements amid yellow fever ravaging the lowlands, killing thousands more than combat. Resuming in August, Scott targeted Mexico City's defenses. At Padierna on August 19th, U.S. forces under Percival Smith flanked Santa Anna's 17,000 via lava field, surprising encamped troops at dawn. Coordinated assaults captured the artillery, and the Mexicans again fled, losing another 700 killed and 900 wounded. U.S. casualties were but 60 killed. Churubusco followed hours later. Mexican defenders in a fortified convent repelled waves with musketry, but U.S. artillery breached the walls, leading to surrender after intense room-to-room fighting. Another loss for the Mexicans with 263 killed. U.S. wounded were 139 killed, with the wounded exceeding that of the Mexicans. An armistice ensued, but negotiations failed. Hostilities resumed with Molino del Rey on September 8th. Scott targeted suspected cannon foundries. 2,700 U.S. troops assaulted 10,000 Mexicans under Antonio Leon. Initial charges faltered under grape shot, but reinforcements overran positions in brutal melee combat. And at the end, another 116 killed. The war culminated at Chapultepec Castle on September 13th. The 882-foot hill housing the military academy was defended by 832 under Nicolas Bravo, including 50 cadets. Scott bombarded with howitzers. Marine and infantry scaled walls using ladders amid sniper fire. The cadets, the Niños Guerreros, fought tenaciously. Juan Escutia reportedly leapt with the flag to deny capture, but U.S. forces breached, capturing the summit after fierce hand-to-hand combat. Mexico City fell on September 14th, and Scott occupied the halls of Montezuma. Going back to the Marine Corps hymn, we've covered them both now. Guerrillas harassed occupiers, but organized resistance had ended. Amid chaos, Nicholas Trist negotiated despite recall. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ceded territories for $15 million, assumed claims, and set the Rio Grande border. Ratified amid U.S. debates over further annexations, the war propelled the gold rush, intensified slavery debates via the Wilmot Proviso and Compromise of 1850, and certainly trained most of the key Civil War leaders. Grant later decried it as unjust. Mexico's loss spurred reforms but deepened instability. Tactically, U.S. victory stemmed from superior artillery, engineering, and leadership, overcoming vast numerical odds. Thanks for listening today. If you want to help the show, please share today's episode on any social media sites you can. Check out the War 102 Buzzsprout website for more information and to send me a message. And, of course, my thanks to the subscribers who help keep the show going. Hope you all join me next week. See you soon.